Good evening, everybody. Wow, what an orderly group. Good night. We'll end it right there. We'll end it right there. Welcome to the Richmond Times-Dispatch Public Square. Actually, our 55th Public Square on issues of importance to Richmond. I remind you, it is a civic conversation where both speaking and listening are equal sports. I'm Tom Silvestri, publisher of the Richmond Times-Dispatch, and your moderator tonight, your humble moderator, I might add. Just as a show, we always like to do this. How many people have been to a public square before? Okay, there's one of your answers. Well, you know the drill, right? This is the nighttime version. We've had a couple of daytime versions to open the discussion up to different audiences. You know the drill. It starts at 7, 90-minute conversation. First part of it, about 30 minutes, me asking the panel questions, open up the back half hour to you. You get a chance, talk into the microphone. You usually have a card with you, if you could hand that to me. And there's a reason for it. Everything on this in this building is on the record. And we know that because we are being broadcast live right now on richmond.com. I have a good authority that there may be a story in tomorrow's paper in addition to the coverage coming up. Just a hunch, just a hunch. The other thing too is that a transcript of tonight's discussion will be online and also in a future Sunday commentary section. Having done 54 of these before, you know how a topic gets selected. It's because there's an issue in the news and there's an opportunity to bring those in the community who are interested in that news with those folks making the news. And that is certainly the case with tonight's topic. It's no secret that the actions of police are being debated and defended. So, we invited the top law officers of the 4 localities in Richmond, the 4 localities that make up 75% of the population in our region. And they have accepted. Welcome, gentlemen. Okay. Round of applause for our invitees. Thank you. Let me just do the shortest of introductions and let them follow that introductions by answering the initial question I will put to them. But welcome, the new guy on the block, Chief Alfred Durham. How long have you been in office right now?
20 days.
20 days, and he's counting. And so far, so good?
So far, so good.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, 20 days is always easy.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, welcome. To your right, the police chief from Chesterfield County,
Hello.
Terry Dupree, Colonel Terry Dupree. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
All the way on to the new guy on the block's left, the police chief from Henrico County, Doug Middleton.
Good evening.
And we've put the only elected police officer all the way to the right, but he is from Hanover County. David Hines. Thank you. Gentlemen, once again, welcome. Let me just start with this question. In Sunday's Richmond Times-Dispatch, our advanced story of this event, a story done by Mark Bowes, who's covered police and law enforcement for many years, the following headline appeared on that story: Challenges confront local police chiefs. From your perspective, as you further introduce yourself to the audience, can you elaborate on those challenges facing your police department, our communities, and our region? Let's be orderly first. Why don't you go, Chief?
Thank you. First, thank you very much for having us. It's a pleasure to be here and have an opportunity to talk to you. And not only talk to you, but get some feedback from you. Because you'll hear throughout this conversation the partnership that we have. It's not just a word, it's part of our mission. We believe in this region. We believe in not just the city of Richmond or Chesterfield County or Henrico or Hanover. It's this region. Some of the challenges that we face, and I'll be more specific now, in Chesterfield County, is growth. We are a very large geographic location. Our population is the largest in the region. We're just shy of 335,000 people right now. Our school population is, I believe it's either the fifth or the sixth largest in Virginia. So we are constantly growing as a community. And with that growth, we're seeing a lot of various interests, various individuals making their homes in Chesterfield County. And much different than when I started 35 years ago with the county. It's interesting because we have to obviously maintain our flexibility and maintain an open mind, maintain an opportunity to listen to what our community expects. One of the beauties that we have in this country is local policing, because we are unique in the sense that we are very receptive to the needs of our specific communities. Much different policing, say, in Chesterfield than you would find in maybe different states. There are probably some similarities, but very different. And I've probably taken up enough time, and I'm sure I'll jump in a few minutes. Thank you.
Number one challenge, growth, different
Absolutely.
types of demographics, changing face of the community.
Absolutely.
Okay,
For us.
all right, good. Good overview. Similar in Richmond?
Yeah, similar. You know, we have varying districts in the city of Richmond. You have your projects, you have your residential, financial, and entertainment districts throughout the city. Coming in, I'm taking a look at all of those, I guess, things that I'm responsible for as it relates to public safety. I've introduced a 100-day plan. In order for me to come in and find out what's going on, I have to find out what's going on in the community. And with that, I have 5 focus areas that I'm looking into in my 100-day plan. The first is what's going on internal under my roof within the Richmond Police Department. Morale issues, needs, equipment needs, and the such. The next thing is our customer care. How is it that we treat our customers, the people that we engage? Everyone from the reports, responding to the scene to take a report, those folks that we arrest, and those folks that call into the police department, both internal and external customers. How do we treat those folks? Customer service, customer care. The third thing is technology. I believe the department is kind of behind the curve. There is so much technology out there to enhance our ability to close and investigate crimes, and that's very important. The other thing is our safeguarding the community, and I will say I'm very proud to have inherited a law enforcement agency within the Richmond Police Department that they actually get it when it comes to the community policing, but there's always room for improvement. So how do we expand upon those relationships and those collaborations, both with our law enforcement partners, our faith-based, and the folks in the community? How do we build on those relationships that we already had, and now how do we create new ones and bring folks into the fold? And the last one is very important, is that youth engagement piece. And that's, again, building partnerships with the youth. There is such a disconnect right now within this city and probably the region, even where my previous employment, in engaging those youth. They think a totally different way than we do, and we have to listen to them and bring them into the fold so we can bridge that gap and have an understanding that we are their friends, we're here to support them, protect them, and we're not their foes. There were a couple of initiatives immediately upon becoming chief of police that I initiated. One was the Blue Light Special. One of the things as I walk through the community for the first couple of months, folks say, we just don't see the police. Well, we know, I know, my command staff know, and the officers know they're out there every day. So we turned on the lights for visibility purposes, and folks now say, we see the police everywhere. So that's already achieved a goal of mine. Another thing is fitness and health for my officers, and well, all members of the police department, both sworn and civilian. You know, it's a job where, I mean, we just don't take care of ourselves. The hours, the stress that comes along with it. Folks end up not having a long afterlife after retirement because all the health issues that we have. So I'm kicking off next Tuesday, March 18th, a Move It to Lose It campaign where we're trying to get folks having fun, working together as a team in partnership to lose weight. And another thing, getting our officers into elementary school. I think that's very important. We have to start introducing ourselves again. We don't want kids to see the first time they're in interaction with a police officer, we're going into their home, arresting a family member or some type of disorderly conduct, we're looked at as the bad guys. At the last Christmas parade, and I'll close out with this, I was marching down Broad Street, crossed over Belvedere, and majority African-American community and family and kids, and walk up to introduce myself to say, Merry Christmas, are you having a good time? And they would not even acknowledge me. Shame on the parents. So that's why we have to go into schools. If we build those relationships in the schools, those kids will go and tell their parents, hey, Officer Durham or Chief Durham was here today talking to me, and that's how you get into the homes and build those relationships.
Good. Thank you. And there was a slight problem with the microphone. That's why I handed that. Chief?
Well, as everyone else, I want to thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. And I think all of us will probably be somewhat redundant in some of the things that we articulate. I think the piece that for me is the most, not necessarily the most challenging, because I think there are some on a very equal plane, but certainly one of the more challenging things we have confronting us in the future is our capacity to employ and hire good people. We're very fortunate to have the individuals we have now, and I don't think as a police chief there's any greater priority I have to ensure that the services our community need are being met than to take care of the people that I'm expecting to deliver those services. And with a lot of the things that you have already mentioned that are going on around the country, the publicity, the negative things that are being said and done, I think that's going to increase our challenges to get the right people into the jobs that we have. So I want to make sure I'm putting the right emphasis on the people that are doing the job every day, the folks with their boots on the ground, who are taking the risks and the challenges, and who are being asked to make split-second decisions, and then knowing after it's done they're going to be held accountable for it. I want to make sure they have the best safety equipment that I can provide to them, the best tools for the trade, and the best technology to carry that job out effectively and efficiently. And the philosophy that we try to operate under is that if we take good care of our people that work in our organization, they're going to take good care of our community. And there's a whole system of accountability factors built into that, and they all know that, and they respond positively to it. But I'm very committed to the men and women in the organization that do the work every day. They, I think, are the ones confronted with bigger challenges than I have in front of me. Now, in regard to that, I do know that leadership has to take a position on a number of things and work through a lot of the challenges that you've already heard mentioned here tonight. You know, our ability to hire those individuals to do the job, our ability to engage our community and do the things that allows them to feel like we're an approachable group of people is important to me. And I think my folks in the organization, I hope, are aware of how important it is. Little things that we started with a program last year called Operation Summer Heat. And essentially what that program did, we had a community day and had every county service you can think of. That was on display. All of our elected officials showed up and had an opportunity to engage with them. And one of the things we also did was have one of our staff officers identify what was going on in the county throughout the summer months. Baseball games, sports events, plays, parties, things that might be going in different venues. And having our officers go to those and just be friendly, engage people. And I think that's part of one of the bigger challenges we have. We have seen technology, I believe, eliminate a capacity to effectively communicate. And so we're doing things now to teach them to do that by creating opportunities to do it and through training. And that is the second point that I want to make. I don't care how many tools we give to an officer. If we haven't trained them properly, their jobs are not going to get done properly. And I think things we've done with crisis intervention training, which is mandatory for every officer in the department, which teaches them skills to how to identify people that are in a crisis, but it also teaches them verbal de-escalation skills. Much of what we're doing with the body camera project, I'm more interested in the training, the fair and impartial training, because that training, I believe, is helping them to identify the implicit biases that every good and well-intentioned person has, and how to deal with those and overcome them so they can communicate effectively with all members of our community. So there are challenges that lie ahead of us, and much of the challenges that lie ahead of us deal with our capacity to interact socially with each other and with the community. But the training piece, I believe, and the support that we give to the men and women with their boots on the ground is what will make a difference in how we address the needs of our community.
Okay, good overview. Sheriff, can you want to close it out on the challenges you face?
Sure, and I don't think our challenges are any different. First, thank you for having us down here today. We certainly appreciate it. The challenges we have in Hanover, we're by population one of the smaller jurisdictions. By square miles, we're one of the largest jurisdictions. We have one of the smaller law enforcement agencies compared to my partners, but we have the same crime. I don't have it maybe at the same level, but I have the same crime, and we fight that same crime together. And I think it's important for everyone in the room to understand that we do have that partnership regionally. The challenge that I think we're going to face in Hanover, and we face it every day, is the expectation from our community that we serve today. We have a great partnerships with our community. We have the Neighborhood Watch. We have the Business Watch. We have a new program, Worship Watch, where we're partnering with our faith community. We are in our schools. We're in the elementary schools. We're doing the partnerships, the community policing, and it's not just it's not a division that polices the community. It's our mission, it's our philosophy, it's the culture that we have throughout the entire department. And part of the expectation that we have from the community is that we're going to continue to have a low crime rate, that we'll continue to have a high clearance rate, but we have growth coming. And when things are going really well, people, including me, we tend not to have that vision, and I think that's why I'm elected to be the sheriff, to have that vision for the future. And the challenge is finding that way to express that vision to the entire community, to our elected officials, to understand that as growth comes, if you enjoy the services that you're providing today, you have to invest in the future. And that future, you can't wait for crime to rise. You have to meet it. So that's one of the, I heard a chief talk about the blue light special, and years ago we used to do that. And that he would get a call and say, we don't see the police. I get a call that says, Sheriff, I see the police. Why are they there? and when you have, this is a open, serious conversation. When you're an elected official and you're sitting there, you're getting a call from a constituent that says, hey, I see this officer there. Why is he there? Do you have too many? And the question is, no, we don't. And to give you an example of it, we have a suburban service area, and then we have a rural area. Well, our suburban service area is 97 square miles of 471 square miles. But within that 97 square miles, I have 67% of my patrol force, which leaves 33% to police the rural area. If we're going to continue to grow the suburban service area, which that's fine, we have to understand that as we grow that suburban service area, we're going to need manpower within that same area. So I think part of the challenge is budgets. We all face those. The technology that Chief Middleton spoke about, hiring good people. All four of us are in competition for those same people. We hold our people extremely accountable. We hire the best because that's what we want to provide to the community. We use a philosophy in Hanover, it's mine, and I tell them I want somebody that I trust to go to my grandmother's house. That's who you hire. So hiring good people and the expectation of the community are some of the challenges that we're facing. There's also another challenge that we don't always talk about, and that's the sense of global terrorism. It's in the national news, it's in the world news, and now we're finding out that can be homegrown. And that's something that locally we will also have to deal with in the future.
Okay, good overview. Let me ask this question so you know where they're from. Let me ask where everybody in the audience is from. Who is here from the city of Richmond? Okay. County of Henrico. County of Chesterfield. See the guard back there will repay your toll when you go out. And Hanover County. All right, pretty good mix. Anybody outside of the Big Four? You almost didn't raise your hand. Where are you from, sir? Okay, Powhatan, okay. Well, this is just like Chesterfield. Okay. Well, thanks for driving up. Just teasing, just teasing. So, you know, I just, disclosure from, I am the son of a police officer, but I also started my career covering police. And so I kind of see it from both sides. My dad used to bring the job home, and we have to process the stress level. But in being a journalist covering police work, I've also seen the community side of when things don't go right. So the elephant in the room is this, and you sort of, Chief Middleton, hit on this. Let me ask you this question. So the elephant is what's happening in the certain parts of America. For instance, today we woke up and there were 2 police officers shot in Ferguson. Nobody knew where Ferguson was in the country until the outcry there. It's ignited an intense national focus. But we live in the Richmond region. We live in the Richmond region. So what happens in Ferguson that gets our attention? How is it relevant to Richmond, the region? How is it not relevant? And how does it change your perspective in guiding your forces?
I'll go ahead and start. Let's step back and think many years ago with an incident involving a gentleman by the name of Rodney King. That seemed to, in my career, really kick off some discussions dealing with community relations. Are we different than that jurisdiction, that region? Yes. Are we different than, excuse me, the area around Ferguson? Yes. We are very different in a sense that, one, I don't really know that area. And I would hate to sit there and paint a broad brush to say that they've done something wrong or they haven't. I don't know. I do know about this region and how we are part of this community. This isn't just, you hear about the community and the police. It's not 2 different things. We are one. This is our home. And we've taken on the responsibility to patrol and to give back to our community, to make it a safe place for our kids to grow up, for our mothers and our fathers. So to me, it's the perspective that we have here in this region that probably makes us a lot different than in a lot of other regions around the country. A lot of individuals that come to the Central Virginia region, and I'm talking about federal authorities, one of the things that they constantly talk about is the spirit of cooperation that we have here as opposed to, say, some different post that they have had. It's very, very unique. It's very, very special. It's something that we all kind of grew up in, and it's normal for us. Things around the country, particularly as fast as news travels, does impact us. What I take from that is to sit back and think, can it happen here? I'd be pretty naive to think that an incident could. The question I have is, would the community react in the same way? And I think that's where we have to make sure that the relationships, the partnerships that we have been doing since I was a kid here as a cop, that we continue to foster those relations. As different people move to this region, they may not have encountered the type of relationship that we have with our community. And then that's why it's important for us to make sure that we reach out to them and bring them into our community. And I can't stress that enough because, a lot of people police community. No, we're one. And I really believe that firmly. And another thing, too, when we put this uniform on, we're not supermen or superwomen. We're men and women who have families. We have good days. We have bad days. We're human beings. We're held to a very high standard. And that's okay because I put this uniform on accepting that. So it's up to us to make sure that we communicate and build those partnerships with our community. We've recently started, and I see some gentlemen here in the audience that attended a recent event that we had. And it wasn't just about the groups getting to know me, the chief, or our police department. It was about them getting to know each other. So when you have that, you start building that community. You start building those things. One day I'd like to be able to sit there and when we have situations that pop up that require a lot of questions, that they can sit back and say, well, I understand and I've got a lot of questions and I've got a lot of concerns, but I know that our police department is a good department. They try to do the best they possibly can. Let's give them a few minutes to try to figure out what happened, and I know that they're going to sit there and work with us. Thank you.
I think I have to agree with what Terry said. One important thing, what folks forget is that police officers are human beings also. Ferguson opened it up nationwide. Law enforcement had to begin looking at themselves and studying themselves. It's a thing in law enforcement called culture, and sometimes culture is hard to break. That's why when you have the leadership, your chiefs and your command staff members, it's very important that we hold folks accountable. Accountability is very important. And they know my mantra is accountability leads to transparency, and transparency leads to credibility and legitimacy in the communities that we serve. I was very pleased when I arrived here, when we started having our protests and demonstrations here, majority of the college students at VCU and the other universities and colleges, was that, you know, they were allowed without the permits to exercise their First Amendment rights, the freedom of assembly. And I tell you, I was so impressed by the professionalism by the men and women of the Richmond Police Department. But not only a majority of the time after each of those protests, the protesters would come up and shake our hand and say thank you. The Richmond Police Department was not a local story or a national story on how somebody had rioted or how we had abused those protesters. It's very important that we have to listen to today's society. You know, I always tell the story, you know, when I grew up in D.C. in the 70s, we had a county out there that I won't name, but they were known for brutality, right on the border. And it was, back then, you had brute force. They were allowed to go in with their billy clubs and the black nightsticks and just hit people on the head, bruise them, beat them up, and walk out, wouldn't even make an arrest. Those times have changed. Folks are no longer tolerating that. I was just reading the preliminary on the, report on Ferguson. I mean, that department, I wasn't there again, but just reading the information that was produced by the DOJ study, I mean, just civil rights violations across the board, First Amendment, Fourth Amendment, 14th Amendment, due process, I mean, just across the board. But again, that's a culture. It was allowed, and the folks became, I guess, immune to it. You know, that was the acceptable practice, so they had to live through it. But here, I would tend to say, based on my relationships that I've established so far, going to community meetings, the faith-based leaders, the programs, we have Citizens Academy, Seniors Academy, just building those relationships that I don't think that would happen here in the city and the region with the collaboration and partnerships and the beautiful people in the city. I really don't think it would happen here.
Chief Middleton?
Well, obviously, everything they've said, we're all working together on a lot of these things. But I do think that we can't lose sight of who the face of our department is. And in all reality, the face of our locality is with the community. It's the street officer, the officer that's running the calls, who's interacting with those folks every day. Because of that, that's why so much emphasis has to be placed on how we train them and prepare them to do their jobs so that that interaction is positive. People like to know police officers. They like to know them. That's why having a school resource officer in every high school and in every middle school and a cadre of them that service elementary schools. Why having community officers that work in various communities and interact with the neighborhood watch groups and engage them. Having periodic meetings within the communities. Working with our elected officials, 3 members of my Board of Supervisors here tonight, when they have a need for a program or an initiative or an effort in a particular area of their magisterial district, we're going to supply that. We're going to work with them to do that. And it is that team approach within a government that I think helps overcome some of those problems that could evolve, because this is really not about just the police department. It's not just about just the elected officials. It's not about this person or that person. This is about a whole team working together to improve the quality of life in a community and build the trust of that community in its police department, in its elected body, and in the people who service it every day. And the way we do that is with relationships. That's why the comments can be made about this region. Al's new. He's 20 days out. He's on a 100-day plan, so I'm trying to keep track of it. We talk to each other. We've built relationships. Dave Hines is more than a coworker and a peer. He's my friend. The same is true with Terry, Al's predecessors. And Al and I have already had multiple dialogue just in the short period of time he's been in that chair. I think when we fail to understand the importance of those relationships, whether it's within our own body, in our community, within our own governmental entity, or with each other, the problems never get heard, therefore they never get solved. So it really takes a good, strong team effort. Having that support from your administration, your government is critical as well. I've got a great county manager who is, clearly committed to public safety. The Commonwealth's attorney is here. I watch her and how she engages. I can tell you that she and I probably talk almost every day about different things that are important to our community and how we can work better together to resolve those. So I do think the relationship piece of it is the critical piece, and that's what makes the four of us so capable of doing things together because we have a relationship, and they are not just occasional relationships. They're very strong, and we communicate routinely.
Okay. Sheriff, they took your microphone away. I don't know if that was a political statement or what. But
I'm not sure. I know the chief broke his. I didn't realize he had broken mine. Let's talk about Ferguson just for a second, because that's what brought the entire topic up. And like the chief, I had an opportunity to read the Ferguson report put out by DOJ. And Ferguson didn't happen. When the shooting happened, we talked about it, and my good friend Robert Barnett is here. We had this conversation, and Ferguson didn't happen with that shooting. The shooting was a symptom. The shooting occurred, and then after reading the report, and you saw what was happening within the city itself, and again, I can only go off what the report said, but you're talking about city manager, you're talking about the clerks of the court, you're talking about a system, and I don't want to use the term, well, I will. It was almost like a debtor's prison going on, where you just couldn't get out. So that was a culture that caused Ferguson to occur. The shooting, I think, set it off. I think DOJ needs to certainly take their report, and I think they need to go back in and maybe look outside of the police department for the civil rights violations that were going on. And if you've had an opportunity to read the report, I would certainly encourage you to do so if you haven't. In this region, one of the things that has been so important to us is what we talked about in the beginning, and it's a challenge also, and that is continuing those partnerships. We had what we called our fall festival up at the sheriff's office. We had over 5,000 people show up for it. 5,000 people showed up. We had over 100 exhibits that were put on just to celebrate our volunteerism within the county, whether it was faith-based, whether it was nonprofit, whether it was state or county government that provides services. And those services were from Habitat to Humanity to a clothes closet to a food closet to the Red Cross. So it's building those relationships. It's having the relationship that after Ferguson happened and waiting a week that I was able to call Robert Barnett and say, Robert, dude, you and I need to have a conversation. Let's talk about what's going on in Ferguson, and let's talk about what we're doing here. I was able to have that conversation with faith-based groups that, hey, there's going to be a protest in the city. Do we need to have a conversation? And the answer that I got back was, no, we know the type of law enforcement we have here. It's okay. So I think building those relations, and that's what takes so much time. And you have to have transparency. You have to have a willingness to continue that relationship. It's one thing to be able to pick up a telephone and call someone. It's another thing to sit back and the chiefs, we all signed MOUs whether it's with each other or with other organizations.
It's an MOU.
I'm sorry, memorandum of understanding, how we're going to cooperate together. And you can do the same thing, whether it's with the Worship Watch but you have to continue that. You have to build it, and you have to invest time in it. And I think that's what I know we do it in Hanover. I know we're doing it regionally. We can look to something that happened in Hanover a few years ago and talk about partnerships. We had a little autistic boy who was lost in the woods. We had over 6,000 volunteers that showed up to help search for him over a 6-day period. I had Chief Middleton, who was out of town at the time, but the next morning, I had 20 Henrico police officers there. I had 15 from the city of Richmond, and I had a call to Terry Dupuy to say, don't send me any right now, but if this is extended, I'm going to need your help. So that's a relationship. And it was the same thing with the volunteers that showed up. They showed up to feed, and fortunately we found the little boy. It was the same thing during the sniper shooting back years ago that occurred in Ashland. We put together each one of us put together a plan within our own county, but then we put together a regional response plan that it didn't matter where it would occur, this is how we would respond regionally. And it worked for us. When everyone came down, we had over 300 federal agents show up in a night. We had a plan. So I think it's all about relationships.
Okay. One more question. I'm going to go to the audience. They'll probably have questions about expectations of you and your forces. Let me ask one question about your expectations of the community. What are your expectations of the community to help make our community safe? Do you have expectations as public servants, or is that something that you have to reinvent, something you have to polish, something you have to use in communication skills? What are your expectations?
Well, it doesn't need to be reinvented. I think it's happening now. A good example is just the capacity of people within our community to be aware of what's happening in the community and then to help us when we have an incident or a crime or an issue that needs to be resolved. Now I'm going to show you two different extremes. Yesterday I received an email message from an individual who was upset about the UCI 2015 race interrupting his life. And
hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, I know it hasn't happened yet, but he knows what's going to happen. And the individual, and I tell you, they made a very good point. I replied back, explained to him that some of the issues he was concerned about were my decisions, that I wanted to work with him and help resolve the concerns he had, explained to him what was being done, and the reply that I got back was, I'm absolutely surprised I got a response. That's the relationship building I'm talking about. Now this individual, I am confident, will work with his community to help us make that a very successful event because we reached out and communicated. In another incident involving a particular crime with an individual who we had been trying to apprehend and take off the streets, at 3:30 in the morning, we get a telephone call from a resident who heard a noise, looked out the window, saw an individual looking inside of cars, and made a phone call to 911. And a quick response from law enforcement resulted in us arresting an individual. As a result of that arrest, we've cleared over 40 crimes. But that was one person who reached out to us when they saw something that just didn't seem right. That's when we need the help of the community. Not just on the proactive and the front end, but when a crime does occur, with things they can provide us to help us solve those crimes. We know ourselves that what we really would like to have happen is that the crime never occurs in the first place. We're in the business of crime prevention. But one of the tools we use to prevent crime is a capacity to solve them when they do, so that individuals know, if you come to this region and commit a crime, we're going to be on you and we're going to find you and we're going to make sure that justice is invoked. So we need the community's help to make that happen. And when they engage with us, when they talk to us, that's what helps us do that piece. But that all goes right back to the relationship issue. On the front end of it, we have a responsibility to engage the community, talk to them, meet with them, and help them feel comfortable that when something does happen, that we're going to work together with them to make sure that it gets taken care of.
Same expectations in a rural suburban?
Yes, I think the expectation that I have is the expectation of involvement and the expectation of taking a responsibility for your community. And I think that's what we've shared, and I think that's part of what the partnerships help build, is that understanding that we're all in it together. I think Terry said it before, we're all part of the community. We're in it together to prevent crime, to solve crime, but to also help each other with these quality of life issues. You know, the government can't do everything for everyone. I think we recognized that early on. So we have to take responsibility within our communities, and part of that responsibility is being a good citizen. And it's also part of that responsibility is when you see something going on, you make the phone call, whether it's to the Hanover County Sheriff's Office or the Henrico Division of Police, to let them know this crime has occurred. And then there's even a further responsibility, and that is to show up in court. I see the Commonwealth Attorney over there, and be a witness, to take responsibility for the actions that are going on within the community. It's easy to sit back and say, that's not my responsibility, that's the police job. But we're all in it together. So I think my expectation, and I have not been disappointed, my expectation is that you have a caregiving attitude within your community. You give back to the community, and you have a responsibility to continue to keep your community as crime-free as possible.
Okay. Colonel, why don't you go, and we'll buy time for the...
Sure.
Yeah.
A lot of it was already said here about the partnerships and what we expect from our community. Much like Dave was talking about, in Chesterfield County, we're blessed because people do call us. They do, report, and sometimes it is multiple calls. And we often are questioned by the community. Well, I thought my neighbor was going to call. I wasn't sure, but I called anyway. That's okay. That's all right. I'd much rather you call and not need us than not call and need us. We've had situations where, and I would like to think this is not just unique to Chesterfield. A few years ago, we had a police officer stopped on Jeff Davis Highway. He was talking with a gentleman, and the guy pulled a gun on him, and he's struggling on the side of the road with this fellow with a gun. We had 3 people pull over and help that police officer. Now that's a community, and that's a community that gets involved and respects their police officers. I think that's huge. That's huge. And again, just making sure that we not only, much like Doug was talking about a few moments ago, responding. Shortly after Ferguson, I met with our local branch of the NAACP, and one of the takeaways on that was, thank you for listening. Great. I mean, I don't live in a vacuum. I need to hear what your concerns are and address those concerns. And just as a short side on it, the following day I get a phone call from one of the gentlemen that were there, and he says, well, I'm sure glad you met with us, because rumor is that you don't want to talk to people. Anybody that knows me knows that I love to talk. That's pretty evident today. But it's building or breaking down some of those barriers and some misconceptions, because they may see just the uniform and not the person in the uniform. And I think that's huge for us.
Thank you.
I think it's very important. I've always stated that every citizen and visitor to this city of Richmond has a responsibility of safeguarding it, your neighborhoods and your communities. That means the national, Homeland Security, they say if you see something, say something. It's no different at this local level. You know, what bothers me when our officers respond to a burglary call, and the neighbor will say, oh yeah, earlier I saw a guy walking down the alley with a super can, but I didn't think he's not the trash man. So, pick up the phone and call 911. But I think it's important that, again, as we were talking about listening, it's a trade-off. People only do in your neighborhoods what you allow them to do. If you let them stand on the corner and sell drugs, you let them counter the riffraff in front of the businesses, that's what they're going to do. For us, we have to make sure, especially for the younger kids, we have to, youth, should I say, we have to make sure that we partner with other agencies, Parks and Recs, and those nonprofits to find something for them to do. You don't have anything to do, you're going to find something negative to get involved with. But the relationships and partnerships is continuing, and I think that this collective body here, and I have to say, again, 20 days on the job, and I can reach out to them. They have taken me under their wings. They're mentoring me, and I want to say it's a true partnership in this Richmond metropolitan area.
Good. I asked the easy questions. I expect some tough questions from the audience. We'll go to the audience. Let me do a quick mic check. How many mics do we have for the audience? Just one?
Just one.
Okay. Thanks for breaking the microphones, Guy.
You're welcome.
One thing I do want to ask, though, Chief Milton, you said something about this being a first. Could you repeat that?
Yeah, to my knowledge, and I think my peers here would agree, that there's never been a forum of this nature involving all four of the CEOs from the local law enforcement agencies in the Big Four.
Wow. Talks about the individuals versus the region, but each of you have had individual meetings, so it's not,
Yes.
you've handled it within your localities. Okay, good. Who has a question? Yes, sir. Now, you're the first gentleman. You're going to model the behavior of standing up, saying who you are, speaking directly into the mic, and giving the blue card to Paige. You're on the clock.
Good evening, everyone. I'm here tonight in reference to traffic stops.
Can you just say who you are?
My
sir?
name is Roy
Thank you.
Bryant.
Thank you, sir.
I have a business in the city of Richmond, and I live in Chesterfield. I had an opportunity to meet some of the finest officers in Chesterfield and got me the biggest ticket that I ever had. I just had to go to court, and while I was in the court, the judge asked me, do you have anything you want to say before I fine you? And I say, yes. This officer came down the middle of the highway where I was driving with the flow of traffic. A white man on the side of me and a white man on the other side of me. But he saw fit to come down and pull me over at the same rate of speed. So when I got to court, the judge asked the officer, did he give you any problem? No, I did not, because I understand policing. Everything you gentlemen said up there is true. And you got to say it because you are hired hands by the community that you're supposed to be serving. But anyway, the judge said, do you have any evidence that they are discriminating against black men driving? I say, Judge, if you look behind me, all the evidence are sitting in the seats. And one day, this thing gonna come up, and you're gonna have to answer to it. And the day I came down here to say what I had to say, go on Monday mornings after the weekend and see how many black men, as Spanish men, and minorities that are sitting in those seats because zip code, I don't know how you go about it, but your officers set up in the low category of the neighborhood, making money off the minorities. So I would like to have a study done, especially by the new police chief. I was never a police chief. I worked in the 7th district as one of the officers during your time are coming up. So I just want to let you know, I know what I'm talking about. And these officers have a lot of strain on them. And they need to be, how you say, given a little relief. I heard the chief say it about weight, but there's a lot of things that need to be taken care of with a lot of the officers. Psychological problems, alcoholic problems, and a whole lot of other problems. But we must be on that, and I agree the community need to be much more. Matter of fact, I used to work with nothing but the youth in D.C. So I just want to say this to you. Welcome aboard, and let's get something done between the community and the people in charge of the officers.
All right, sir.
A reaction? There's a lot there. Statistics, checking police work.
Well, checking police work is all about accountability, and that's what I'm about, so we'll be looking into that.
Good evening. Thank you for this time.
I'm Marty Jewell. I live in the city of Richmond, and this is more germane perhaps to Richmond than anything else. I think most of you will remember 10 years ago, Richmond was in the top 5 of the most violent crime cities in the country. I didn't say 5%. I said top 5 for years. Chief Monroe came here with his folks, and I think Chief Durham was with him, and brought that crime rate down like a souffle. Now, look, y'all, I've been a civil rights activist all my life. I ain't been no fan of the police, and they ain't been a fan of me. But they made a believer out of me. In my opinion, Richmond Police Department is 10 times more courteous, 10 times more professional, 10 times more effective. But hold it, now that I kissed you, I got to kick you. Because in fact, you can go, we've got 3 general district criminal courts in Manchester, full every day. But if you find more than 4 white defendants in that courtroom, I'll eat your hat. Now the implication is that only black people commit crimes and Hispanics. Well, we know that's not true because, Chief, out in Chesterfield, I visited your jail 2 days in a week. The overwhelming majority of inmate visitors were white people. So yes, white people commit crimes, but maybe not in Richmond. What I'm saying here is that this all begins with the street cop and his perception of who's the doer of the crime and who should be stopped, punished, managed, or whatever, and who not. Now, I understand you've got some implicit bias training going on. I'd love to see that curriculum to see whether it's real or whether it's Memorex. But that is an excellent place to start, and I commend you for it. Thanks.
Former Councilman Jewell from Richmond makes a great point. How has training changed? And what is the challenge of training to get at some of the issues that the community has about policemen?
I think the point he made is a point that we are seeing as a national trend. And Ray Tarasovic, Al's predecessor, and I both saw a presentation 2 years ago. And as a result of that, began working together to develop our participation and interaction in that. And I'm glad you want to see the fair and impartial policing presentation. And let me tell you what we've done with that already in Henrico. We've met with the leadership of the NAACP. We met with the leadership of the LGBT community. We've met with various political entities. We've met with citizens groups. We've met with senior citizens groups. We had an open community forum the other day, but we've looked at every group we could to develop that training, and we've attached it as a mandatory piece of training to our body camera project. And what that training really focuses on doing is helping officers identify what those implicit biases are, recognizing that even well-intentioned people have them, and then developing the skill to put them aside. And part of that focuses on having the idea in your head that I need to treat everybody the way that I would want to be treated or the way that I would want a member of my family treated. And it doesn't matter where they come from. It doesn't matter what the color of their skin is. It doesn't matter what their sex is. It doesn't matter what their sexual orientation is. None of those things should matter. Many of us have different faiths. We're from different places, and we are different colors. But that's what makes a community vibrant. And learning to overcome those things and treat people fairly, which is really what procedural justice is about fairness, is critically important. And the individual, if you're interested in seeing more about it, who has worked with Al, and I don't know if your trainer is here tonight or not, but Major Clarence Hunter is in the room tonight, and he's worked with the city of Richmond and Hunt. Clarence, if you would stand, he's the point man for that project for me. He's done a superb job. We have trained 150 of our officers already. Our plan is to train not just our sworn police officers, but even the civilian personnel within our agency, so that when they're servicing a citizen, whether it's in a field environment or in an office, they have that same level of training. We're getting away from the concept that everything is about just race. It's really about you and how you see things and overcoming those things and not feeling like you're always under the gun, but you can change. And until we change that perspective, how we engage the community is not going to change either. But I believe your points are very valid points. When we met with some of the groups that we have already delivered this presentation and training to, they felt the same way. We just presented it to the Commonwealth's attorney and all of her staff, so they would understand when someone comes to court, this is the training the officer is receiving. And we want the prosecutors to know that, so when they're evaluating the validity of a case, they know how that officer has been trained. When we launched the training in the fall, we split the classes where half the class was command staff from my department and half was command staff from City of Richmond. Al was in that class. We sat next to each other. All of our staffs went through the training. That was 2 full days just for staff. The training for the officer in the field is 6 hours. It takes a little longer for us to catch on. We had to have 2 days of it. The trainer class was 3 days long. So each of us now have a cadre of trainers within our departments that can go into the field and teach. And we're planning to utilize them across the boundaries of our jurisdictions. A class could be taught in the city of Richmond with Henrico and Richmond officers, or in Henrico with Richmond and Henrico officers. A lot of these initiatives that we're working, however, came about long before Ferguson. And I think it's that recognition that these types of things have to be progressive and have to be consistent that has made us different. And one of the points that I made, and I'll be quiet after this because I think Al wants to talk about what they're doing with the Fair and Impartial as well. When you look at the demographics of our communities today, Henrico's school system is a majority-minority school system. We have a host of different nationalities living in our community now that require all kinds of linguistic skills, capacity to interact with them, and we're trying to even recruit within those realms. One of the points that I made in some of the preliminary questions that we offered was that the New York Times recently did a study across the entire country, and they looked at individual states to look at migration of people. What that study showed that in 1900, 93% of the people that lived in the Commonwealth of Virginia were born in the Commonwealth of Virginia. In 2012, 49% of them were. So people are moving here. There's a migration from various areas of the county to here. But that's happening, or state, that's happening in every state. But we have to be able to adapt to that in law enforcement. And I think for too long, things were the status quo. And that doesn't mean they didn't need to be at that time. It's just we had to make changes in the culture, which you've heard a lot of talk about here, in order to move ourselves forward and to address the relevant and current problems that are confronting not just our individual communities, but our nation today. And the way that we do that is we engage with other police chiefs. We listen to what's going on in the country. We go to meetings and conferences and hear what the trends are. And we walk away from those with different ideas and new approaches to how to police this community. And one of the great things that's happening here is the 4 of us talk. And we share that information. And the training we're delivering to our departments, we have every intention of offering to Hanover and to Chesterfield, so that this is a regional approach to how we do business. Because we want everybody on the same sheet of music, and we want to make sure that at least in the Richmond region, to the degree that we have a capacity to do it, that justice is served, and it's served properly, and it is served fairly. So your question's relevant, and I really appreciate it.
As it relates to the Richmond Police Department's training, we should be wrapping up. We have about 739 members that we're training in fair and impartial policing, and we should wrap it up the end of the month. But Mr. Jewell, I hear you. Last year, in 2014, the Richmond Police Department answered and responded to over 280,000 calls for service. With that being said, if folks are arrested, of course, we all know, we train our folks in the academy that arrests are based on probable cause. That's a set of facts, circumstances, or reliable information that will have a reasonable officer to know that a person committed a crime or was about the crime. Then that is taken to a magistrate, and he or she issues the warrant. So I would like to believe that our officers are out there making good arrests. There have been some. I've seen one that come across my desk where it was an unlawful arrest, and I have to deal with that at that time. Is it a training issue? Was it a supervisory issue? But those are the things that we look at. And again, we're human beings. Do we always get it right? No, but we have to get in front of it, be transparent, and be honest to you, the public, because again, that's our legitimacy to you.
Paige, another question?
Could I just add one
Sure,
thing to that?
absolutely.
One of the things that we've seen, and I think all of us up here have our citizen police academies. And one of the things we've done with our citizen police academies is we then ask people that have gone through it to volunteer with the agency. So they volunteer with the agency, and one of the things we saw was a certain use of force that came out of our academies during an arrest. And we kept looking at it saying, well, why are you putting someone on the ground to handcuff them? It just didn't make sense to us. And then we found out that that's what we were teaching, because it's the safest method to handcuff someone. So one of the things we did, we got our volunteers, our citizens, to help us in our academy. So now they come in and they work with our officers as they're going through. So now you have a gentleman 65 years old sitting in the car, and that's who the officer is now interacting with. So we have our citizens that actually help us in the academy. So our officers are training right along with the people that they will be out there in the community with.
I'd like to point out, Dave, that I'm 65 years old.
Yeah,
Wow.
you're okay. That's part of what we do. I think the other thing that is very important is knowing that my peer to my right, my 64-year-old peer, he offered, as soon as he put the training together, he called me and said, hey, Dave, I'm doing this. Are you interested if we come out? Are you interested in doing this with us? Can't do it right now, but later. I'll offer the training to you. And he'd also be looking for this.
Eventually we're going to get to your question.
The sheriff just stated one thing. He just says, they bring their citizens in and assist in the academy. And I don't know if you saw me, I shook my head. I looked at my staff. They agree. So that's the beauty of this. Something that he may be doing in his jurisdiction, we could bring it to this training. So that's what we're talking about, partnership. I mean, he doesn't have rights on that, not now anyway, because he done told us. But that's what it's about, sharing, doing the right thing to serve the community better.
Yes, sir. Thanks for being patient.
Al Simmons, I live in Richmond. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming out and sharing your knowledge with us. Another fact is that black and white men use drugs at about the same rate, but yet black men are in prison at about 3.5 times the rate of white men. Michelle Alexander in the new Jim Crow points that out. It's a great book if you haven't read it, and I'm sure you probably have. But my more immediate concern is the militarization of police departments across the country. I heard the phrase used, and I get it because I was in the Army, boots on the ground. When I hear the phrase boots on the ground, immediately what pops in my head is this is a military confrontation. That's not a way to reconcile things. What I'm asking you gentlemen to look toward, whether it's a model in the United States or whether it's a model in Europe or wherever it is in the world, we need to find, if possible, less lethal ways to deal with violent people while protecting the people who serve us. I have to believe that if we can put a man on the moon, if we can look to the furthest reaches in the universe, that surely we can find a way to arrest a crazy person without killing them. Black men in this city have been unarmed and killed on their porch. That's a crime, but it wasn't treated as a crime. I'm wondering what you can do to make our police forces less violent as they respond to violent people. And I understand that's not an easy thing. Thank you.
It's not a hard thing either. And since I'm the one who used the term boots on the ground, I want to address you first. I think that's a good phrase to use because that's what we're talking about, is the people in the field that are on the front line. And they're dealing with criminal issues every day that put their lives in jeopardy, and they're taking risks. Unlike any other occupation in the civilian world, if you will, they're confronted with a threat that I think is important, and it's why do they have to wear body armor every day? Why do we have these things on? Because that threat exists, and they are that front line. They're those boots on the ground that are there to ensure justice is preserved and the community is protected. protected. With regard to the idea of individuals in a mental crisis, I can tell you all four of us have worked together diligently to implement crisis intervention training in our agencies. Now, this is a fairly new concept in terms of how long it's been here, but it's been over the last 5 years it has evolved. I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but I'm a big believer that training is key to teaching our officers the skill sets they need in order to address the problems they're confronted with in the community. The greatest tool that we have is not something that's on this utility belt. It's the capacity to interact with people verbally and de-escalate a situation. Now, in those situations where it can't be, or that individual will not respond and will not comply, then there have to be other tools that the officer has available. In that regard, I don't disagree with you. There has to be other means of addressing those problems. You've seen a lot of new technology through electronic control weapons that have come out that officers carry. When we implemented those in Henrico County, the first thing that I did was go to some of the mental health groups that individually deal with people that are in mental health crises and ask them, is this a good idea? Will you support it? And what can we do so that the training meets the needs of our community? We mandated 40 hours of crisis intervention training, which includes role-playing, which includes de-escalation training before that officer can ever put that electronic control weapon on their utility belt. And then we insisted that it not be something that's black that could ever be confused with a weapon. It's banana yellow. You can't miss it. And it has tools attached to it. In addition to that, every single one of them has a high-definition color camera. So whenever that weapon is utilized, whether it's deployed or not, the minute it's activated, that entire incident is being captured on video. So I think there are technology, while it is at times a challenge to us and creates problems, it also, if we look at what we're doing and we plan properly, it becomes a very useful tool to us in how we address community problems. I'm not familiar with the situation that you described where someone was unfortunately shot, but I hope that never happens. And the way that we as leaders have to resolve that is through the process we put our officers under in terms of training them properly, holding people accountable, and making sure that practices and policies are followed. And the unfortunate thing is that a lot of times things happen in situations that the community doesn't know all the facts about. And for various reasons, they can't know until after that has been resolved through the court system. But I understand the concern that you have, and I know these guys do because we talk about it frequently. And that's why we're all very committed to crisis intervention training. And we're all doing crisis intervention training in a different way than what it had been done across the country. As an example, it's not just the police officers going through it. In our classes, we have the police officers, we have firefighters, we have mental health workers, and we have EMS workers that are all in that class. And they team up and they work together to learn that skill, so that when an officer arrives on a scene where maybe the firefighters or the EMS workers are already there, they know what that officer is going to do and how he's going to act. And the officer knows what their responsibilities are and how they're going to act. And I think this goes right back to one of the things that came up initially, is the way to get us to where we need to be in the future is accountability and training. And I think the crisis intervention training addresses the needs you're describing. I think the fair and impartial policing training addresses one of the other needs that's been described. We cannot underestimate or undervalue what training does for us in law enforcement. And unfortunately, all too often when budgets get tight, that's one of the first places organizations go to cut funding is in their training budgets. You haven't seen that in this region. We're staying focused on that. I'm sorry, Alan. Let me take all the time.
Can I talk now?
Yeah, you go ahead.
Okay. Just respond to two of your questions. One, very critical point when you're talking about those folks, drug abusers, or substance abuse, should I say, being arrested. I think the city now has a day reporting system to try to address that. Putting them, meaning society or governments that finally realize that it's a health issue. You know, just locking them up is not solving their issue about they abusing the substances. So Richmond has a day reporting system where the courts assign you to this, and every day you have to go, and they have counseling, they have job counseling, and health, substance abuse counseling. So I think that's a good thing here for in the city of Richmond. When we go back again, talking about use of force, twice a year, training, as Chief Middleton just said, twice a year we send our folks to use of force training, meaning they have to do firearms qualification and run through scenarios, different scenarios. when they go through there. So it's a training thing. I cannot tell an officer how to perform when he encounters a threat. There is an expectation based on his or her training. That's how they're going to perform in that critical incident.
Okay, next question.
Jan Schenholzer. I'm a person in long-term recovery from substance use disorders. For me, that means I've been clean and sober a little over 32 years. And I'm not looking for applause, but you can applaud. Thank you for coming out. I don't have any particular negative things to say about y'all, except after listening to you talk, I'm convinced y'all talk too much. But other than that, I know you have a hard job.
John, you should be one to say that.
I won't go over 2-3 minutes.
Passion, John. It's called passion.
I got you. That's exactly right. Sheriff Hines, I'm from Hanover. I think they should all do that Citizens Academy that you did, because I went through it, and one of the coolest things I ever did. And I found out during that academy training that back in 1975, you only had one officer patrolling the whole western end of Hanover. Daggone if they didn't find me that night and lock me up. So my luck has never been good. Times-Dispatch, y'all published an article a couple weeks ago about a free opiate detox we did over at the McShin Foundation and Clean Life Medical. I can't thank you enough for that, for running that article, because what it told us was that we have a physician that could only do 30 detoxes in a day. By 7:30 that morning, we had 30 opiate addicts lined up to get that free detox. We turned away hundreds. Our city has over 1,000 desperately seeking, got to get a hit opiate addicts, and they're not trying to get high. They're just trying to get well for the day. And these 30 people, we questioned most of them. Every single one of them were committing multiple crimes every single day: prostitution, going to Target, Walmart, Home Depot. They have to steal $1,000 worth of goods to get $300 worth of opiates. Now, here's the hit. It costs you, and I've analyzed this, and I'm giving you a minimum number. It's probably twice the number I'm giving you. $3,000 of our tax dollars that you're allocating for our system of care for these desperately seeking opiate addicts. For you to take an addict off the street for 5 days, lock them up, arrest them, have all the patrolmen do their thing, pay their pensions and their retirement, pay for the Commonwealth attorney to prosecute them, you're spending minimum $3,000 in a 5-day period. That same addict, we can detox for $300, okay? We can start tomorrow. Now, these freaking flyers we're talking about, most of them are coming back, okay? Would you rather come back at $3,000 a pop or come back at $300 a pop? I think the taxpayers would rather see the $300 a pop. And here's another hit. I can reduce by 50% the frequent flyers and make our community a better place. So we speak of the new Jim Crow. I think we have a discrimination problem in our culture. Addiction, addicts, substance use disorders. There's 23 million of us in recovery, 23 million need recovery. 56 million people, or 46. And we're not properly recognized or dealt with. We're automatically throwing us away, and we got the taxpayers believing this. Now, I need your full help. I'm asking, I got two asks. Ask number one, please go to your funders, the Board of Supervisors, City Council. Ask them, look, we got to start stepping up. Let's get $300 a pop. Let's get these people out of the streets before we spend $3,000 plus. Number two ask, you're all members of associations, go to General Assembly, Sheriff's Association, Police Association. You're allowing 5 delegates to make an extra 100 drug laws a year that increase the amount of money we're going to spend to get these people off the street. They can't make one law down there to reduce addiction, reduce the need to keep funding, and you're letting it happen by co-signing these associations. So my second ask is get involved with your association. When you go down to General Assembly, ask them, look, let's start getting some intelligent laws passed, because we're throwing away generations, and there is a solution. It is recovery, and you can have recovery for $300 a pop, and I'll finance it. I promise you I will put the cash down, pay for these detoxes if you promise to reimburse me like you do these agencies at all that much less.
John, don't you dare say anything about him talking too much. And I know John. John's a personal friend. And I know there was a question in there.
We just hadn't figured out what it was yet.
One of the things.
This is the second time drug addiction. There's a lot going on here. There's states approving marijuana, coming to grips about people with low drug charges being jailed for too long, and there's a lot here. I mean, I think that's something to dig your teeth into.
And John and I have had this conversation before, and I'll tell everyone in this room, we're really good at what we do. And if we could arrest our way out of the drug problem, we would have already done it. So arrest is not the only answer. It is sometimes part of that answer. And John, you said it yourself when you talked about the person that's going out here finding that $1,000 a day just so they can get to the level where they can function. They're no longer getting high, they're just functioning. Being a heroin addict is a full-time job, and we've seen it. We're working together on that because what we're seeing is whether it's our robberies, whether it's our burglaries, or whether it's our larcenies, whether it's the stealing of a catalytic converter that they're climbing up underneath of a car to cut off, they're drug addicts. That's what we're seeing. I know what you want to do, and we want to help you do that. But we also understand, and I know you understand, if it was just as simple as us grabbing someone off of the street, handing them to you, you detox them, and they go on and become pillars of society, we would do it tomorrow. That's not what happens, though, and to some extent, you know some of this. There has to be a willingness for someone to want to have recovery. Sometimes that willingness only comes after they hit bottom. You and I have talked about the bottom. Sometimes bottom is going to jail for that larceny, knowing that the root cause of it is drugs. Now, maybe one of the things that we need to be talking about more, and I know Shannon's here, we probably need to be talking about drug courts, things of that nature where we can start addressing the problem. We still have to talk about the symptom of the crime that's being committed other than the crime of the drug itself. And we still need to focus on the penalties that we're using for drug dealers, those people that are out here that are strictly out here to make a living off of someone else's misery. We still have to concentrate on that. So I don't think anyone's against what you want to do. I think it's a matter of us working together to find a mechanism where it works, and it all has to come from a willingness on the addict's part to want recovery, the willingness for you and society to want to help, the willingness for law enforcement to partner with the Commonwealth Attorney's Office, the courts. So everyone realizes that. And you know I'm serving on the Governor's Task Force on heroin and drug abuse. And I think that's another area we have to look at, is what are we doing in prescribing opiate medications? And I think there's been a serious look at that too. So I think, and I know you're very passionate about this, so, and we're just as passionate. So.
We could reduce the overdose death rate by 50% also if we just fund these addicts that want to help. Forget the ones that don't want it. You take care of them. We got 1,000 people who come tomorrow. They're asking for help, but we don't give it to them. And it's so much cheaper to give them help. That's really the point I'm trying to make. So.
Gotcha.
Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you for the question. Yes, sir, in the back.
My name is Ray Muhammad, and I want to address American institutional racism. And I say that we're all victims of American institutional racism. I'm a native Richmonder. Since I've been on this earth, I've been a Negro, I've been a colored, I've been African American. So I'm from that tribe of people who have never had a name for themselves. So now they're calling us black. I went to the dictionary and looked up the definition of black and white. White is an adjective of the color of fresh snow, showing all the rays of the spectrum combined, the opposite of black, pure, innocent, harmless, honorable, honest, favorite, fair, irreproachable, free from spot or guilt. Definition of black, an adjective, destitute of light, of the darkest hue, opposed to white, enveloped in darkness, dismal, gloomy, or forbidding, destitute of moral light or goodness, atrocious, evil, calamitous, threatening, clouded with anger, sullen. These are the words that are being used to define Americans here in this day and time. These words operate on the subconscious level. So when those, and it's been institutionalized, we're taught by educators that when they go to school, that the indigenous American African is the black child. If he has 1 ounce of African blood in him, he's the black child. The European, American European, is being taught that he's the white man, a white child. These words plant the idea of superiority and inferiority in the human being. And when you tell my child, when he goes to school, that he's the black child, you're planting the idea of inferiority right then and there. So we're all victims of American institutional racism. And I would like to see us stop defining human beings according to color. Every one of you from Europe know your tribal origin and your national origin. The only people on the planet Earth who do not know their tribal origin is those, my African ancestors, who were brought here against their will. Okay? And I say my African ancestors because we're now products of both European and African ancestry. And after 400 years of slavery and oppression, we have evolved into God's newest tribe of people without a name for ourselves. And media is complicit in promoting this idea of the indigenous American African people being the black people and the European, American European being the white people, and it has to stop. This is the 21st century. We notice how the demographics of here in America have changed. We have tribes from all over the world with their identity intact, but because we've been defined as black, and let me assure you, it's cumulative. We don't come into the world thinking we're black, but when you're constantly told that you're black, black, black by everybody, did you hear the definition of this word? That's all I want to do is bring it to your attention. Let's eliminate defining human beings according to color. All right? We are, like I say, if you want a generic term for Europeans, it would be the American European, not the white American. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's face it, the black and white issues in Richmond come up all the time. You heard an eloquent portrayal of that. One of you said that it's not the color, we're all the same people. But there's a reality, it's perceptions. I mean, how do you address that? Okay.
Well, we're dealing with that perception across the board, which once again I think is one of the reasons why we're trying to focus on putting those biases aside. The gentleman articulated quite well. Some of these things are so ingrained into our culture and society that these biases are implicit. And well-intentioned people have them. They don't even know they're expressing those biases. That's why it's so important we work diligently to try to overcome them. With regard to the issues of what we call color, whether it's black or African American or white or Caucasian, generally those are being legislated to us by the United States government. And when you look at what the federal government produces, that's kind of the model we're obligated to follow. I have no problem with changing it, and I doubt anybody here would. But some of these things are way beyond our capacity to do anything about and change, other than to change or work towards changing the behavior of the people that work in our organizations. And I believe that we are all committed to that.
Okay. Got time for a couple more questions. Yes, sir. Welcome.
My name is Adib Abed, and I'm from the Arab American Association of Central Virginia. I commend the chiefs and the sheriff and the Richmond Times-Dispatch for holding this forum, because I believe this is a first step and it's an important step. We don't have to wait to have a Ferguson event take place in Central Virginia, or a Chapel Hill event to take place in the Richmond, Central Virginia area to address the issues that are there. There are natural human biases that do exist, and I believe dealing with those biases is very important, especially by the police departments and those who are enforcing the law. When they enter into a community, they should not be looked at as an occupying force, but they should be looked at as a friend. When a police car rolls down the street, people should not scatter. They should see that this person here is coming to help you. And also, it takes two to play the same part, and that is the community and the police. As Chief Dupois said, we are all in it as one. Yes, we are one. We had an incident recently where an Arab American car dealer was killed, and the perception was that he was an Arab American, a Muslim American. The police department is not going to find his killers. And I conveyed that message to Chief Dupois. And when the killers were caught and found, he shared that information with me immediately when he made it public, and I shared it with the community in order to dispel the perceptions that are there, because there is a lot of misconceptions about our community as Arab Americans, especially in terms of international terrorism that the sheriff hinted to. Because when you talk international terrorism, you talk about either Islamic ISIS or Al-Qaeda, and you see somebody walking down the street with his wife with a hijab or with a brown complexion or with a beard, your instinct bias is what comes out of the media. Your immediate reaction is that this person is a suspect. And I think that it's very important for the community to reach out to the police and the police to reach out to the community to get to know that we are suffering more than anyone else from these extremists. More than anybody in the world, it's the Islamic people, the Arab American, Muslim Americans, are the ones that are really getting the short end of the stick from both sides. We treated by law enforcement are possible suspects and guilty, and we have others that are trying to hijack our religion and doing things in the name of the religion, and the media is playing into their hands by calling it Islamic extremism, Islamic terrorism, Islamic this and Islamic that, because that is exactly the narrative that ISIS is playing. That is exactly, you are promoting their logic and their propaganda that they are the true Muslims, they are the ones that represent in Islam, by calling them Islamic extremists. I call them just plain evil people.
Now, 20 years ago, we would never hear Islamic terrorism in Chesterfield in the same word, in the same sentence. But the region is changing, and he made a mention of what happened in Chesterfield.
It was at the breakfast that I talked about and brought all the different groups in. It was interesting because as he was explaining or expressing his concerns and his community's concerns, we either had already made one arrest or we were getting ready to make an arrest. And of course, I couldn't share that with him. But one of the first things that we did was I want to make sure that he gets a copy of that news release, because I'm interested in making sure that any type of information like that gets out, and that's communication. That's what it is. That day, I think we built some trust. And I think we will continue to build that trust, because I think he understands. And when I told him that we didn't care the nationality or the race of the victim, it is a person that lost their life, and we're going to do everything we possibly can. And in this particular case, we're well over 5,000 man-hours into it. We're still looking for one person. So we're going to do everything we possibly can in order to bring justice to the victim of that crime. And it's not just because it happened in Chesterfield. It can happen anywhere in the jurisdictions that these gentlemen have. And you're going to get the same kind of service, guaranteed. Thank you.
Time for one more question in the back, 8:30.
My name is Jesse Frierson, and I'm with the Virginia Alliance Against Mass Incarceration. And this is a question that I'd like to ask each one of you all to have give an opinion. And of course, we know that the General Assembly sets the laws. Virginia has a law that sets the threshold for grand larceny at $200. That was increased from $100 to $200 back in 1980. DC's threshold is $1,000. Pennsylvania, South Carolina, Delaware, $1,500 and $2,000. There are a lot of kids, as well as mothers, in Walmart stealing Similac, but they locked that up now, from what I understand, who are going to jail over a little or nothing. Decent pair of sneakers, article in the paper, a couple of pair of sunglasses, as well as a used iPhone. A lot of our kids are going to jail, black, white, green, and brown, all of them. What is your opinion, each one of you all, if you would, short answer, please. What is your opinion in terms of Virginia having a $2,000 felony grand larceny threshold?
Well, disclaimer, I just been here 20 days, so I really... No, a serious point, yes, it's $1,000 in D.C. I'm not familiar with here. I would have to probably defer to one of my staff members to answer that. I think that is kind of low, especially young kids, don't have anything better to do to go steal something, and for them to get a felony record, that's kind of unacceptable. But the law is the law.
I don't know about the amount, but I certainly believe in what you said as far as examining in changing that amount. You're absolutely right. $200 is a pair of sneakers, pair of sunglasses. I've got 3 kids, and it's nothing for them. It's to spend that kind of money, and I do sympathize with what you're saying. And personally, I think we have to look at things like that, and that's the beauty of us sitting down and talking. Because, I'm getting all kinds of great ideas. I never really thought about the definitions, as the gentleman in the back talked about, or bringing these things up. It's important for us, and we said it all earlier. We're part of this community. You need to talk to us. We are part of all the different associations. We do spend a lot of time at the General Assembly. And this was truly silly season down there this year.
We'll get Jeff for the editorial board on you in just a minute.
I'm the chief. I'm on the legislative chair for the Chief of Police Association. So we have a lot of different things in the hopper. So it's interesting that you bring up these things because sometimes we don't know. We may not see it the same way you do, and that's the beauty of us getting together and talking.
Other chiefs?
I'm less concerned about the dollar value that's placed on it than I am how it gets adjudicated in court. That's where I think the relationship between the police chief and the Commonwealth's attorney is so critical. In many of these instances, and we had a gentleman talking about heroin addiction, individuals are stealing things to support an addiction. Last year, 78% of all crimes committed in Henrico County were larcenies. Now, many of these individuals are in desperate need of treatment and help. And sometimes the only way we get them that treatment and help is to get them into the court system, working with our prosecutor, working with the services that we have available, and directing them out of the criminal justice system and into treatment. The idea that I have is that what are we picking a dollar amount for? What's the basis? Why $2,000? Why $200? Why $500? I have concerns that we would just arbitrarily pick a number without any legitimate research and study to identify what it ought to be. Now, I can tell you there are jurisdictions in the Commonwealth of Virginia that won't prosecute on larceny as a felony if it's less than $1,000. So a lot of things can be done by working with the prosecutor's office, which I can tell you happens in Henrico. I imagine it does here as well. But my objective in any person we charge, whether it's a felony or a misdemeanor, is to identify what that person's issue and problem is, and then try to get them the services and help they need to get them out of that behavior that got them in the criminal justice system in the first place. The amount, whether it's a felony or misdemeanor dollar amount, all crimes have different things that create a threshold, and the legislators make those calls. From my perspective, sometimes the $200 threshold is a good thing, because I can catch a young person who maybe commits a crime, they understand the seriousness of what it is, and that is enough to get them into the system, get that taken off their record, and get them the help they need so they don't ever do it again. The problem I think that you're explaining is that everything tends to be A or B, or black or white. And I don't necessarily think that's the way the criminal justice system ought to work. It has to have flexibility in it, and it has to look at the individual and what that individual's needs are, what their background is, and are they, as Sheriff Hines so clearly articulated earlier, is there a willingness on their part to overcome the problem that's gotten them there in the first place. But I think we could eliminate a lot of crime if we could deal with some of the problems that are contributing it, like the drug problem. And I think the issues you're talking about, the larceny issue and the threshold, if we raise that, that's going to further inhibit our ability, I think in many cases, to help people who need that help, because they're not going to get it on a misdemeanor charge. So that's why I think there's got to be dialogue about what the threshold is, and not somebody just yanking a number out. And I think that it probably does need to be changed. But I don't know that I would agree it's $2,000.
Sure. And I'm going to answer it like you suggested quickly. We're not really talking about value, and you and I know that. And what we're talking about is whether it's going to be a misdemeanor or a felony. That's right. And that's what we're really talking about. Are we going to raise the value of that so that it will no longer be a felony? So I think it deserves a conversation. Obviously, there was a conversation that went on before because we've raised it once. That conversation is going on now within the General Assembly. I think it needs to be that conversation. I don't know that that's the answer to solving the problem of theft. It'll certainly be the answer to having less felons. I don't know that that's, but I'm not sure what that accomplishes, other than I know the accomplishment. John and I have had this conversation. What does a felony do to your record when you go to get a job? You know, what does that felony do to your record? How does that hinder you in getting employment? How does that hinder you in an education? So that's the conversation we need to have. We're law enforcement. I want to have the conversation, how do we stop that person from stealing?
Exactly.
How do we have that?
We're out of time for questions, but we want to do one thing before we get out of here. We mentioned technology, and technology has become a part of the solution. Is your officer still here who has the camera?
I sure hope he's here.
Okay. Okay.
There he is.
One of the things in the news, sir, would you come up? Sorry to make you wait 90 minutes, but here's your 5 seconds of fame. And Chief, help me out on this. One of the things that we heard as a possible solution is this notion of a body camera. And so we thought while we had an audience that was interested in the Chief's point of view, that we would demonstrate this latest thing. So take it away.
Well, Lieutenant O'Keefe has been the point man for us on the body camera project, and I'm sure as most of you know, we have acquired 400 of them. It is the second piece of our fair and impartial policing. One of the things that we believe fair and impartial policing promotes is trust. The body camera is the way that we're going to be transparent to our community about delivering that trust. Lieutenant O'Keefe has worked with all of the processes that were necessary to get us to the point that we're at, along with Major Hunter and Captain Palkovics, who is here, who oversees our quality assurance component. And those individuals together have done a really great job of delivering a package for us that I think is more than just a piece of technology and a camera. It's an understanding of why you're wearing it in the first place. That's what we want to get out of the field. I'm going to let him explain the particulars of the technology and how it works, because I'll probably break it if I mess with it. So go ahead, Dennis.
Yeah, you do. We'll not hear you on the broadcast.
All right, good evening. My name is Dennis O'Keefe. We looked at several different vendors for the body camera. We went with Taser International. We also have their Taser weapon system. But the camera's made by Taser. It's a point-of-view camera. There's 4 different options which the officers can choose where they wear it. The kit comes with a pair of Oakley sunglasses. with both tinted or clear lenses, and it just clips right to the side of the sunglasses. If they don't want to wear the sunglasses, there's a headband they can wear, and it just mounts right above the ear. Those are the two head options. I'm wearing the collar option, and the fourth option is an epaulet mount that goes on the epaulet. So those are the four options that the officers have to choose from which to use. The way the camera works, it's a battery and controller. It can either be placed in the pocket or worn on the gun belt. But the way the controller works, it's a 12-hour battery. All of the video is stored on the camera itself. So when the officer starts their shift, they turn on the controller. Once the controller is on, the camera is buffering. So right now the camera is buffering. What I mean by buffering is right now it's recording on a 30-second loop. Every 30 seconds it writes over itself. The controller has a start button, so if I want to start recording, I double tap the center of the controller. If I double tap that, I start recording. The good thing about this camera is once I start recording, it goes back and grabs that 30 seconds of video. So let's say an officer witnesses a traffic accident or a traffic infraction or a crime. If within 30 seconds, if they turn the camera on, it should capture that on the video. When they're ready to stop recording, they press and hold the button for 3 seconds and it turns off. All the video is stored on the camera. At the end of their shift, they put the camera in a docking station and it uploads to evidence.com, which is the cloud-based video asset management system that we're using that's provided by TASER also. That's the quick down and dirty of the camera. I'll take any questions you may have, if that's all right with you.
Well, we're kind of. Why don't we do the questions offline because we're past the 8:30 mark.
I'll be out in the lobby.
Where are you going, Chief? We're not
and
done
I'll answer any questions you may have.
Yeah, we have. Thanks very much. Appreciate it. And everybody in front was live on his cam. I want to thank the chiefs. Maybe we should do this again sometime because we had some great questions and some great interactions, and if we can be the conduit for making a better community. We heard a lot about leadership. We heard a lot about training. We heard a lot about problems. We heard a lot about work to be done. But we also heard that that we're leaning into solutions. And you know what? We're not Ferguson. We don't want to be Ferguson. We want to be Richmond, Virginia. And so on behalf of the Richmond Times-Dispatch, we appreciate your attendance tonight because once again you proved that a tough topic can be civil. Good night, everybody, and we'll appreciate it. Give a round of applause, please.